Hi everyone, welcome back. Michael McVitie with Red Fortress Property Management here again to do a quarterly analysis, the final quarter of 2025, and going over what's happening here in the real estate market, but specifically with rental properties in the Southwest Florida area. That includes Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Naples, Port Charlotte, and Lehigh Acres. So I've been a little bit busy with the end of year stuff for our clients, as well as attending a luncheon with the Fed. I'll be talking a bit more about that at another time, but it's been very, very busy with the end of year things. So normally I do this about a week earlier, but it's been very, very busy, like I said. And without further ado, we're going to get into the rental analysis in our area here in Southwest Florida. So for those of you that are new to this, what I typically do is cover certain very specific areas of data. So first of all, we start with U.S. national sales. So what's happening with the overall real estate market in the United States? That affects a lot of things like interest rates and government policy, right, at the federal level. Then we break down what's happening in the United States with regards to multifamily rentals. What typically happens at the national level with apartment communities often is a precursor to what happens in the single family home rental market. Then we'll talk about the national single family home rental market, what's happening in that kind of ecosphere. And then we'll finish up with some Southwest Florida numbers, because again, real estate is local, right? So what's happening in our area? And then finally, I'll give you some actual data from our company and tell you what's happening and what we're also seeing as well. So we'll tie it all together. Okay, so without further ado, part one, the U.S. sales. So what's happening with the American sales market, home sales that is. So when you're looking at this graph here, green itself is typically good. That means that there's more sales of homes, and the kind of pinkish, or the further red it gets, if you'd like, that indicates it's bad. There's less sales going on. So when you look all the way down in December of 2025, you'll see that it was 334,000 homes sold last month. Okay, in December of 2025, that's actually up. It's been about 4 or 5 years since we actually did that well. But generally speaking, overall, it's the average rate in the last, say, 25 years was just over 400,000 sales. So while it's better than last year by 5,000, it's still not where the 25 year average is. Okay, so home sales are a little bit slowish. Let's take a look at the U.S. inventory housing wise year over year. So when we look at December 24 to December 25, you'll see in Florida there's 5% more houses on the market for sale, okay, compared to a previous year. So there's more inventory for sale in Florida. When we look, interestingly enough, and I thought this was an interesting comparison, again from Resi Club, when we look at the U.S. inventory for homes prior to the pandemic, so we're dating back to December of 2019, what does that kind of look like for us? In the state of Florida, there's 23% more homes for sale than there were 6 years ago. Now, there's a reason for that. When you look at this graph, you'll see a lot of negatives, negative 27%, negative 34, and negative 41% in the Northeast. Okay, so they have much fewer homes for sale today than they did prior to the pandemic. Okay, and there's a reason for that, because they weren't building like we were. So Florida and the South, like Texas, Tennessee, they have a lot more homes that we're building in the last 6 years, and that's why there's more inventory, more homes, and that's the reason why we have 23% more homes for sale today in 2025 versus 2019. And when we look at that and we're looking at, so what's happening to the value of the properties, once again, congratulations, just like last quarter, we are literally year over year. In this case, you're saying November of 2024 comparing to November of 2025, we are once again in the negative 10% range. Or breaking it down by more so city, very similar to last month. Congratulations, Punta Gorda, Florida. You are the worst city in the United States year over year. Your home values from November of last year to November this year, you're down by minus 13%. Right behind us is Cape Coral and Fort Myers, where we also serve, at minus 10%. Northport, Sarasota, Bradenton, they're down by close to 9% year over year, the real estate value. Naples and Marco Island said, you know what, we don't want to be left behind now. They've climbed up to -7%. So those are the top four cities or largest metro areas, as they say. So they took the top 300 metro areas in the United States. We are in Southwest Florida, where we serve, the top four year-over-year decline. Now, Hawaii and Texas decided to break into the fifth and sixth spot, and then we have Tampa, St. Pete in the seventh spot. So there you go, followed by some more places in Florida. So once again, when we're looking at the value of the actual, marketplace in the housing market, Southwest Florida, whether you're talking about Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Naples, Northport, you're looking at almost a -10% year-over-year reduction. What that means is that basically, if homes were selling for 300,000 in these areas, now they're basically selling for 270,000. Okay, so that's a little bit of the U.S. sales, part one. Now let's get to part two. What's happening in the multifamily rental industry? So a couple of slides to go over with here. First of all, when we're looking at the U.S. multifamily and looking at this slide right now, the turnover right now, which is interestingly enough, is pretty much the same, meaning that more people or less people are not really moving out. It's all staying the same, very similar in the last 3 years, actually, or 4 years, where they're hovering at about 39% turnover, meaning that 61% of the people are renewing their leases and the other 39% are turning over, but it's not increasing, luckily, for the multifamily industry. Our rate ourselves is typically around 30% turnover, meaning 70% or 2/3 plus of our renters renew each year. So ours is about 70 to 72%. Now here is some very interesting news. So this graph talks about how the multifamily industry has had the lowest occupancy rate ever. That's in the last 14 years. So when you look at here, they're now just hovering above 93% for the quarter, for the year. So obviously that's not very good for the multifamily industry. That's going to affect building and so forth when you're literally sitting at the lowest rate ever of occupancy in 14 years. As well, going along with it, I don't make up the numbers just reporting it, but again, from Zelman and Associates, a great research group, you can see literally that the fourth quarter in 2025, when they're talking about blended rent growth, okay, you can't say that fast, but blended rent growth, what that means is what is the rental rate when somebody new moves in compared to the person that was living there before? Is it higher or lower? And then also, what are you renewing people at? Is the rent going up, staying the same, or going down? So you can see right here, very small, like the lowest rate since November of 2020, so 5 years ago, and it's literally hovering both move-ins, new move-ins, and rentals, renewals at like 1%. So it's almost flat in terms of the rental rate. And also another graph I just share with you that's I thought anytime I see these things, I just pull them out to show you guys. Again, the new move-in rates, here's the thing, it's the lowest ever. Sorry, but lowest ever in 14 years. It's literally the new move-in rates are down for the quarter by -2%, meaning again, if somebody were renting a property for $2,000, you're going to take 2% of that off, which is I think $40. So now you're renting that same apartment for $19.60 when somebody moves out and a new person moves in. So the new move-in rental rates are down by 2%. The blended rental rate, the only thing that's keeping this in a positive is basically the renewal rates for the people, and that the blended rate is just a little bit over, like just under 3%. It's more like 2.5%. Okay, so what does that mean if people aren't basically moving out? That when they do, that the rents are lowering, and that by 2%. And if again you have a situation where people are renewing their lease and it's going up by maybe 2%. Are they doing a lot of concessions to get more people in? And again, the concessions were at 56%. So it did tick up from last month, but it's not the highest in 2025. The highest was a couple of months ago. So we're looking at, again, multifamily. We're looking at less move-ins, or I should say less people moving out. They're kind of staying there. The renewal rates are very flat, about 2%. When people do move out and somebody new moves in, it's going down the rent. and it's interesting time in the national multifamily area. Now, here's we're going to get into the third aspect of the U.S. single-family home rental rates. But here's an interesting stat I saw. I thought I'd share with you to show you a little bit of a different how the markets are different. So this slide just talks about, for instance, how if we're looking in the Tampa metro area, they were talking about the single-family rental rates, how they increased by 1.3%. But the multifamily rents in the same area went down by 2%. Remember I was talking about that 2% nationally, how when somebody moved out and somebody new moved in, the rental rate actually went down 2%. Well, that's something similar, say, in Tampa, but the single family homes went up by 1%. We'll see what happens in our area. And then they talk about the single family home prices going down by close to 6% in value, and yet for condos themselves, they've gone down over 12% year over year. So all these numbers, what does this all mean? Well, it depends on what you're looking at. When you're looking at rental rates for multifamily, single family, if you're looking at real estate values, or even if you break those real estate values up on average to single family homes and condos, you always get a different picture. So that's the reason why sometimes we say things and like, why is it a little bit jumbled? It's just how you look at the numbers. So let's take a look at the single family home industry in the United States. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is occupancy. And here the occupancy, again, is doing okay. In December, it went up a little bit higher than November, so that's good. But for the quarter, the fourth quarter in 2025, the single family home occupancy was still down from the third quarter by a little bit, like 0.3%. Okay. So it's kind of hovering there, still sliding, but they did see a little bit of growth in December compared to November. So that's, I guess, better than nothing. Now, when we look at this new graph, new rental move-in, what's happening here? You will see that again for new move-in people, just like the apartment industry, you can see that the new move-in rental rates, they're down by 1%. And in fact, it's the first ever in 14 years that they've done this or so, or 10 years on this graph anyways. It's the first time it's ever had a quarter that went into the negative for new move-ins. So they've had, cases where individually on a month it might go into negative, but not for 3 months in a row. It just did for the first time ever. So once again, what that means is that like multifamily, it's kind of bad when people move out. Nationally, single family and multifamily, chances are your rates are going to stay the same for rent that you're asking, or it's actually going down for the majority of people. When we talk about this single family home blended rental rate, once again, it's the worst on record. It's hovering kind of about 1%. So again, the blended rate is when people move in or we're renewing the lease. What does that number come out to? 1%. Okay, so very flat. And here's an interesting graph that always people want to see, the days on market. So how long does it take to rent properties nationally? Is it going up, meaning that it's harder to rent? Going down, meaning it's easier to rent the properties? Well, we increased last month. I'll buy a lot in November. Now, again, remember this is the United States, so you have some places where it could be snowing and maybe people don't feel as much moving at that time. But 44 days on the market, it's basically very high, highest in like 6 years plus. I mean, it's very much in line with kind of 2025, but it actually increased a little bit more. So once again, the days on market, like they were saying here, that they're starting to rent least desirable units, and that's what's obviously affecting a lot of the days on market. Those homes that have been hard to rent or condos might finally be coming off the market, but it's taking a while for them to do it. On average, close to 45 days on market before renting. So another interesting thing that I thought was kind of cool was the turnover is steady. So we were talking about the multifamily, I should say, and what's happening with their vacancy rate. So they're sitting, it's kind of stabilized too. Also, pretty much for the single family home industry, fourth quarter is a little bit higher in terms of turnover compared to 2024 here in 2023. Not a lot, maybe a percent to 2%, but it's still pretty good in that regard. And a final slide for the national rental market, if you like. for homes, how are people looking at investing? So when you're talking about investor demand, are they looking at buying single family homes to say rent it out as an investment property, or are they looking at buying it and maybe fixing it up and then selling it and flipping it? Well, buying for investment property right now, it's at a very, very low level, meaning that most people are not looking at renting the property that they just bought out for investment. They're typically buying them and then selling them, fixing them up and selling them. So again, the investment market, people buying rental properties nationally, is not going very, very well right now, and it's kind of been on the decline or in the negative, so to speak, for the last 3 or 4 years. We'll see what happens next month. So getting a little bit more into the local market now, we'll go over some of the metrics locally, because again, when it's dealing with our rental market properties here, we want to make sure that we take the national stuff into consideration because they affect interest rates and so forth. But really, the local market is very, very important. And let's take a look at some of that data. So the local market, what's interesting is that they were talking about the airport passenger activity is up by 6% year over year. So that means more people are coming to Southwest Florida, at least through the airport. So that's good. Also, what I thought was very, very interesting, and this is important for us to know, is that the unemployment rate in September to November of 2025 rose by 1.7%. So now the unemployment rate in our area is 5.4%. So that is kind of normal, but what's interesting is the trend is going up. So more people are not working as much in this area. And again, that does affect rental rates a lot because it's about people working and their discretionary income. That definitely affects, obviously, the rental rate, just like the natural supply and demand, right? But speaking of supply, the single family home building permits are down 11% from August. That's the last time they had the data. So in other words, from 2024 to 2025, we decreased the building permits by 11% for single family homes in Southwest Florida. And the single family home sales rose 16%, which is good. This is the data from November of 2024 to 2025. But having said that, you also have to keep in mind that while it went up by 16%, the actual sales price went down between 2 and 7% median wise. So that's where you start to see, well, we're selling more homes, but the home prices are sliding down like we talked about before. And they also mentioned that the residential listings in our area are up by 2%, meaning that in December of 2024, we had X amount of properties for sale. Now they're 2% more in December of 2025. So looking at some more data, and I've normally showed you this big list of Southwest Florida rental data, and I break it down again. It's kind of a little bit small, but into several areas: Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Lehigh, Port Charlotte, Naples, and Bonita Springs by the month and so forth. And that's a lot of data. And you can take a look at it with the actual numbers. But what I thought I would do is say, hey, how are we doing right now with the seasonality? How are we doing year over year, that sort of thing. So sometimes you could have a stat go down, like the number of rental properties going down for 1 month, and you're like, hooray, like that's good, like things are getting better, but then they go up next month. So I wanted to break down that data a little bit. Again, just about this data, for those that don't know, what I did was I took data for 3-bedroom single family homes. The reason why I took the data for 3-bedroom single family homes is these are the most desired properties by the widest audience or rental audience, meaning that most people and a lot of different groups can actually work with living in a 3-bedroom home. Like you could have a single person, a couple, kids, roommates, all that sort of thing for a 3-bedroom. And you can't really kind of do that with a 1-bedroom single family home or a condo. So we look at 3-bedroom single family homes because that's arguably the greatest single point of where people want to rent. And if that's the case, how is it working? How many properties are on the market? I go to the same source every month and I fixate on the trend. So it's not just the individual number, like 731 for the month of December in Fort Myers, it's the trend itself. So again, and I break it down by how many 3-bedrooms are on the market in a particular city, and then also, hey, let's look at the affordability. What's available for $2,000 a month or less, and then further breaking it down to $1,700 a month or less for a 3-bedroom home. And again, keep in mind that I'm not talking about whether it has garages or fenced-in backyards or square footage. I'm just saying, hey, listen, if you were a consumer, how many rental properties could you possibly look at that had 3 bedrooms in particular areas? So looking at that, let's take a look at the year-over-year data. So when I compare December of 2024 to December of 2025, what I did was I compared all the data with what is the change or the delta for all of these. So when we're looking year over year, okay, we have 226 more 3-bedroom homes for rent in Fort Myers. The number of 3 bedrooms that are 2,000 or less available for rent has increased by 110, and 100 $1,700 or less rent, it's increased by 38 units. So in every metric, Fort Myers has increased from December 2024 to December 2025. Same thing for Cape Coral. The number of 3 bedrooms home from December of 2024 to 2025 has increased by 179. 285 more 3 bedrooms in Cape Coral, $2,000 or less. And if you're looking at renting a 3-bedroom home in Cape Coral, it's 133 more properties year over year for $1,700 or less. Looking at Lehigh, they had the biggest increase year over year, 299. You might want to think of it as 300. So 300 more 3-bedroom homes for rent year over year. The number of 3-bedroom homes that are 2,000 or less increased to 302. What's amazing is it went from 170 to 472. It's a pretty big increase, so you can see that the market's softening there as well year over year. And then 1,700 or less, it increased by 130 choices for 3 bedrooms. Port Charlotte, 126 more homes that are available for rent, 3-bedroom that is, 115, 2,000 or less for rent, and there's an extra 52 3-bedroom homes for $1,700 or less year over year. Interestingly enough, excuse me for changing that slide there, but interestingly enough, Naples, the one area, the one green shoot, as they say, we actually had a decrease of 23 properties year over year. So in December of 2024 in Naples, they had 1,325 properties. Now they're down to just over 1,300 properties, so a decrease of 23. But they do have a couple of more properties available for rent. 2,000 less, it increased by 6. And even 1,700 or less, they now have a property that's a 3-bedroom there for rent. Bonita Springs, I didn't have the data back in 2024 because I added them as a subgroup for a couple of different reasons. So I will be doing very shortly a year-over-year data for that as well. Now, looking at the year-over-year data, that's kind of interesting and good. You see that in every single category except for one, the number of 3 bedrooms available to rent in Naples, every single category, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Lehigh, Port Charlotte, they all increased. So there's more, no matter what you're looking for, rental-wise, price-wise, there are more 3 bedrooms anywhere in Southwest Florida compared to last year, period. But what does it look like, say, compared to last quarter? And this is where we get a little bit of a different result. So there is some like good news. So I don't always want to sound poor about the rental market, but there is some good news. So this is numbers from September of 2025 to December of 2025. You can see here, Fort Myers, there's 86 less properties on the market that are 3-bedroom. There's 7 less properties available, $2,000 or less. But also, like showing the weakness of the market, you're seeing that $1,700 or less in Fort Myers. There's now an extra 20 properties today compared to 3 months ago. Cape Coral, good news. Again, that green is indicating a lower total. So we've gone from 1,338 properties down to 1,172. So there's a drop of 166 properties from September to December in Cape Coral. Also, the number of properties, $2,000 or less, dropped by 62, and $1,700 and less, it basically stayed the same in Cape Coral. So that's good. Going from September to December. Again, looking at Lehigh, kind of interesting results here, kind of stayed the same. It was a little bit surprising. So for the last 3 months, Lehigh only had an extra 14 three bedrooms come on the market. 55, an increase in number of 55, $2,000 a month or less for three bedroom homes in Lehigh, and an extra 17 properties, 1,700 or less, that are now available in December versus September. Port Charlotte, very stable, like we've typically seen in the last year or so. Only an extra 10 three-bedroom properties, an extra 9 2,000 or less price point today, and an extra 1,700 or less price point. So again, you're seeing some pretty good stability in Port Charlotte. Naples, again, like I said to you, they've gone down by 98 properties. So year over year, they went down. And in the last quarter, from September to December, they had 98 less three bedrooms for rent. Everything else was pretty much in line in the last 3 months for the price points of 2,000 or less and $1,700 or less. So looking at that entire big picture, if you like, you're starting to see if there was a little bit of good news. You can see that in Fort Myers and Cape Coral, at least some of those rental properties, the number are starting to decline slightly. And that's good, because what that means is that as you have less supply, obviously, that would mean that demand for the clients or the landlord would go up. But don't worry, renters, if you're watching this, you have plenty of selection. And while there are fewer properties to choose from in Fort Myers and Cape Coral now as compared to 3 months ago, not to worry, you still have a huge inventory to choose from. 731 in Fort Myers and over 1,000 in Cape Coral. So you still have lots of options to choose from. Now, when we look at the lower end of the market, we're looking at, again, if we had $1,500 or less. So I'm not looking now at three bedroom homes anymore. I'm looking at literally, if I have $1,500 a month or less, how many options do I have on the lower end of the rental market? And you'll see that it's very, very stable compared to November. 5 only choices in Naples, up from 3. Bonita Springs, you still have 1. I guess they still haven't rented that property yet. Come on, guys, get it rented. In Fort Myers, you go from 137 to 135. So again, very stable. 118 in Cape Coral to 133. So Cape Coral is the big winner, if you'd like, in terms of the lower end properties, 1,500 or less. It actually increased by 15. Okay. Lehigh Acres, stable, 85 to 83. And Port Charlotte, 53 to 45. So a slight downturn in Port Charlotte. Port Charlotte, of any area besides maybe Naples, Port Charlotte by far is the most stable that we've seen over the last year. I kind of like, I guess, the new supply is meeting the new demand, is the way I would put it. It's not doing fantastic, but at the same time, it hasn't been seeing the losses that we've seen in Cape Coral, Lehigh, and Fort Myers. So again, the lowest rental rates that I could find that were dealing with actual one bedrooms as opposed to renting out a room, 1,300 in Naples, $1,399 in Bonita, $850 in Fort Myers, 800 in Cape Coral. That's again down from 990 last month. 950 in Lehigh, so that's down by $100 compared to November. And Port Charlotte also declined by $100. You can rent something for $800 there at the lowest end. So when we're looking at applications and so forth for Red Fortress, I broke this down for the last 3 years, month by month. On this side, you can see where there's 5 months that we actually increased the number of applications year over year to compare to 2024. And then you can see to the right here are the number of times or months when we didn't increase, which was 7. So almost half the time we had more than last year. But the total number of applications for us from 2025 increased just over 10% from 2024. So that's great news. We've done a lot more marketing online. So we had 10% more rental applications year over year. And again, that number can vary depending on how many properties we have on the market and also the type of property we have on the market. If it's a rental property for $5,000 a month versus $1,500 a month, that would normally have a tendency to affect your rental application rates and so forth and numbers. So a final note right now. So real quickly, what's happening coming up next? So one of the things I'm going to be doing soon, probably next week, is I'm going to talk to you about what I learned from the Fed. So last year I was there, attended it, great time. We had a speaker from the Fed, the Federal Bank of the United States, talking about what they see about interest rates and unemployment and all kinds of charts and graphs. So I'll break it down for you very, very simply. I used to add it a little bit to this. Now I want to break it off so I can spend 5 minutes looking at that. Then I'm also going to be doing a video on a personal rental property. So when I talk to my clients, I want to let you know what it was like for me as a landlord using Red Fortress, and what did I do with the rent and what happened the previous rent. Just like we're talking about, somebody moves out, did I offer it the same rent, did I go up, what was the results, everything else like that. And then another video that's going to be coming soon, and you'll especially hear it if you're a client of Red Fortress, is where we rank nationally. So there's some kind of interesting information coming out now, and we're going to be talking about how Red Fortress ranks nationally and also how we rank in the area from a third party. They did a lot of data on us, and it was very interesting. So I'll talk to you in the video about that process. And then finally, if there's questions or a video you'd like me to see or talk about, email me, mike@redfortresspm.com. mike@redfortresspm.com. If there's something that stood out for you from this video, for instance, email him and say, hey, Michael, that was really interesting. I didn't think that, we were starting to see a little bit better results in the market in Fort Myers or Cape Coral. Whatever might have surprised you, let me know. These are the numbers. I'm just reporting on them, trying to give you some clarity. So again, guys, I'll be doing something next week. Look for it on our YouTube or our website, redfortresspm.com. I post all the stuff that I do there in blogs. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.